Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. And today I want to bring you a few more games from the 2021 US Championships. I've made a video like 7 months ago that I'm going to link up here, covering 4 games from the first 4 rounds of the US Championships, which I thought were instructive. And I didn't actually finish coverage on that tournament, so I went back and looked at all of the interesting games, and I found 7 to present to you today. And so the first game we're going to look at is from round 5 between Fabiano Caruana against Daniel Naroditsky. And so Fabi opened up with e4 and e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, and d6. So this is known as the modern Steinitz defense, and this is not very popular, but this doesn't enter like the mainline Ruy Lopez with like knight f6, bishop e7, castles, and then like d6 or d5, possibly in the Marshall, and all of those possible lines. But this d6 approach, this kind of like a less popular way to deal with the Ruy Lopez, I also really like. Another way to enter this type of the nature of this position, which is like kind of more of a close Ruy Lopez, is this other move, bishop c5, which is explained nicely by Grandmaster Michal Marin in his Modern Chess video series, where play can continue like castles, knight g7, c3, knight g6, d4, bishop a7, bishop g5, f6, so provoking f6, bishop e3, castles, knight bd2, d6, and black is going to get in bishop d7 and queen e8 with a fine position with some ideas maybe of knight c7 or knight d8 to d6, and maybe pushing f5 at some point. So this is like some of the possible ideas that you can get. I do recommend checking out that series and buying his course, but that's neither here nor there. And in the game, d6 was played. So after castles, bishop d7, c3, and knight f6. So the main move by far is this move g6, with the idea that after d4, bishop g7, rook e1 being the main move, but maybe this other move played by Ferrugia, h3 against Carlsen in the World Blitz Championships in 2019. It continued like knight f6, bishop c2, castles, rook e1, rook e8, so very standard play here. After knight bd2, queen e7, bringing the queen to f8, and we will see this maneuver after knight f1, queen f8, knight g3, and then bishop h6. A typical idea that we see in the King's Indian, for example, because the bishop is quite bad behind this pawn chain. So after knight g5, there's actually the game continued knight d8, where this improvement of f4 may have been really strong and provides white with a good attack here and a big advantage already. But that's just for your information, what could happen. But knight f6 was chosen, and after this, rook e1, g6, d4, bishop g7. So the bishop doesn't look too good on e7, so bishop g7 makes sense. Knight bd2, e takes d4, c takes d4, and then castles. And what black tries to do in this position is, even though white has a nice center here, they're hoping that after trading a bunch of pieces off, that it's not going to be that easy for white to actually win the game and get a big advantage here. Because the bishop on g7 does have potential to look really nice on this diagonal. So play continued h3, and then knight b4, trying to trade some pieces. So knight b4 needs to be really careful about some idea of possibly queen b3, as we will see after bishop b7, queen d7, and then queen b3. So there's an extra on this pawn on b7, and a5 was played to solidify the knight. And after a3, knight c6, white cannot take this pawn because that would trap the queen. Here I don't know why d5 was not played. Maybe the reason is that Fabiano thought after knight b8, queen takes b7, knight a6, and a couple more moves. There's like queen c6 or queen b3. Let's just look at one of the sample variations. Queen c6, dc6, knight c5, e5, de5, knight e5, rook fe8, rook b1, and then knight d5 here. After knight dc4, knight e6. This is the best line according to the computer, where black has an active position in exchange for one pawn, but still white is slightly better here, and black definitely needs to play accurately to maintain the balance. But maybe this line was deemed unclear by Fabiano, so he didn't go for this. I do think that this is the best line though. But instead, knight f1 was played, just playing it more calmly. And now here a4 comes. And after queen d3, notice that all of the light squares, for example, here c4 and b3 are kind of weakened because white has already played this a3 move. And so here, Dania played knight a5, trying to employ a light square strategy here with possibly b5 or knight b3 to come. And after bishop g5, knight b3, rook a d1, h6, bishop f6, bishop f6, knight 1 to d2 was played. Here it was, the computer considers this an inaccuracy because we can actually just follow the line after we trade off the pieces. Knight d2, rook d2, bishop g7, stepping away from any e5 with tempo, queen c2, rook a e8, e5, rook e7, preparing to double up on the e-file, rook e3, rook f e8, so just as planned. Then after rook c3, putting some pressure here, black can actually get away with playing c6 here and sacrificing the a4 pawn, because if first off e d6, then queen d6, and notice that the d4 pawn is going to be weak here. So after g3, there's also some very nice tactics here involved with rook e3, noting that f e3 is actually a mistake because queen takes g3, rook g2, queen f3, and this pawn on e3 as well as the pawn on h3 are loose. This bishop is a monster, and black is actually already better in this position. Meanwhile, if white takes on a4 here, then we have rook c3, bc3, queen d5, attacking this knight, and after king g2, b5, queen c2, and queen c4. We note that all of the light squares on the queen side here are taken control by the black queen, and black has fantastic compensation in this position. Note that the majority on the queen side here actually are halted by these two pawns, so the extra pawn doesn't really matter here. And so yeah, that's what could happen. And note that after queen it takes a4, there's also de5, and queen c7, where the e5 pawn is also weak, and black will win it back very shortly. And in the post-game interview, the reason that Danya said that he didn't take on d2 was he was afraid of knight takes d2 and then bishop g7, where f4 comes. And with this pawn mass, the engine says that this is equal, but clearly from a human perspective, this is not easy at all. So knight d2 would have given black equality here, but knight a5 was chosen, maybe just trying to still go for the light square strategy with b5. And here knight b1 was chosen to bring the knight to c3 and pressure a4, b5, queen c2, bishop g7, knight c3, and then c6 here. Rook f8 is best, just keeping the position solid, but because after c6 here, there may be actually the opportunity to play d5 here. And after cd5, there's rook d5 with a lot of activity here. I give the line knight c4, where black actually holds everything by a thread, because right now knight takes b5 cannot be played on account of knight b6, where the knight on b5 and the rook on d5 are being hit, and the rook doesn't have any squares to defend the knight. So after queen c7, which is kind of forced, queen c7, knight takes d5, knight takes a8, rook takes a8, ed5, and bishop takes b2. The a3 pawn is going to drop very soon, and black has the outside pass pawn, which provides great winning chances. So d5 was kind of like a missed opportunity here, and e5 was chosen. After this, rook f e8, knight e4, knight c4, defending the d6 pawn, e takes d6, knight d6, then knight e5, and here black has to move queen f5 to pin the knight, and so this pawn is loose, but it cannot be taken right now. After g4, queen e6, knight c3 was chosen in the game, which actually gives black an advantage because black has already advanced the pawns very fast here, and the bishop, if it opens up, will be a monster attacking the weakness on b2. Instead, knight takes d6 is the best move, and I think this gives white some advantage here after queen d6, and just taking the pawn with knight c6. rook e1, rook e1, and then bishop takes d4. It looks like material is equal for now, but after knight d4, queen d4, there's this very nice move, queen c6, attacking b5 and the 8 rook. Also preparing this move rook e8. So after rook b8, there's rook e8, takes, king g7, and the queen b5, where white is up a pawn here. It's not going to be easy or trivial to win, but white does have an extra pawn here, which which is like the best that white can hope for, and the computer gives slight advantage here for white. Instead, knight c3 was chosen, and here, because of the advanced pawns and the control over the light squares, black actually found a very nice move here after rook ac8, rook e2, and then queen b3 to infiltrate all the light squares. And after the exchange here on b3, king g2, c5, and this loosens the knight on e5. And after dc5, knight c4, knight takes c4, rook takes e2, and knight takes e2 was chosen in the game, which soon led to disaster. But still, here it's already pretty bad for white, because a move like knight d6 still gives black a big advantage after bishop takes c3, knight takes c8, bishop takes b2, rook b1, bishop a3, rook b3, bishop c5, and this pawn on f2 drops. King g2, rook c2, and the problem here for white is that besides being up a pawn, black has the very strong bishop against the knight in an open position, and a very active rook on c2. So this gives black also good winning chances. However, knight takes e2 was chosen, and this leads to like a quicker loss after bc4, rook c1, bishop takes b2, rook takes c4, bishop takes a3, c6, bishop b2, knight c3, and then bishop f8 was a nice maneuver to reroute the bishop to the g7 square. And after knight b1, bishop g7, king f3, king f8. And again, in the post-game interview, Donya mentioned a very nice calculation here, which is after king e4, king e7, king d5. It looks like the king manages to defend the pawn on c6, but there's this move rook d8, king c5, and rook d1. And against rook e4, first off, against king b6, there's rook b1, c7, and then rook c1, where the king on the b file is actually prone to getting checked, this promotion with check. So that's winning. And instead of that, rook e4 would lead to king d8, king d6, rook takes b1, c7, the king d7, where there's this tactic of playing rook e7, but after takes, c8 queen, bishop d4, king b5, and rook c1, the pawn again promotes, and also with check notably. So that was a very nice calculation. But instead, in the game, h4 was played, king e7, and this is already a lost position for white, because the king is just going to march forward, and after this exchange happened, the pawn drops, and the bishop e5, and the rook c2, and after this, the exchange of rooks happened, and this was quite clinical, being up a pawn. Takes, knight b1 here, and this is a technically winning endgame. And after g3, king f3, and bishop d6, white resigned. So that was a really nice game by Naroditsky there. Just taking maybe from the opening, it doesn't seem like it equalizes, but in the bigger picture, the position was completely fine. Maybe at some point white could have taken the pawn, and black would be fighting for a draw, but still that was a great game nonetheless. So we're gonna move on to the next game here, between Jeffrey Xiong playing the white side against Sam Shankland. And here, this was also from round 5, and Jeffrey opens up with knight f3 and c5. Obviously an invitation to the Sicilian, but after c3, d5, d4, it's quite clear that we're going to get a London system here, with this typical pawn formation on c3, and possibly e3 next. e6, bishop f4, and then bishop d6. So black chooses the most direct way facing the London system here, with an early c5 and going for bishop d6. I think this is one of the best ways and one of the simplest ways to deal with the London system, so I do recommend playing this way. And after e3, knight c6, bishop g3. Here knight g7 was played, which I don't really understand. I do think that the knight is better on f6, which is by far the main move, because it controls the e4 square. and also the knight just looks way better here. Meanwhile, on e7, the only two possible squares it can land on is either g6 or f5, and we will see later in the game that on g6 it's kind of vulnerable. Meanwhile, if it's on f5, black always needs to worry about bishop d3 and taking the knight on f5, where the pawn structure will be damaged. And you can check that game out between Carlsen and Topalov, where Carlsen just got a really nice advantage by breaking black's pawn structure down with that knight f5, bishop d3, and then taking there. But here, after knight bd2, c takes d4, e takes d4, castles. I think that this is already an inaccuracy. Knight f5 immediately is better because we will see in the game after castles, bishop d3, and then knight g6. The problem with this is that if black can get a knight f4, like right this move, then black would already equalize essentially, because the knight would be very nice there. But the problem is that it's white's move first. And after knight g6, there's this move queen c2, which puts pressure on the h7 pawn, where we will see that this knight on g6 becomes a real problem. Besides knight g6, the computer recommends to play f6 here, and for castles, knight f5, queen c2, because if white definitely does not want to take on f5 here, because e takes f5 threatens the move f4, and we notice that there's this massive pawn majority on the king side here, which could advance at some point. Let's say after bishop d6, queen d6, rook e1, bishop e6, queen e2, rook a e8, and in this position there's already the possibility of playing g5 and f4, where the pawns are gonna create a massive initiative for black, and black is certainly not worse. But in this position, there's, like, for example, queen c2, king h8, bishop d6, queen d6, rook fe1, bishop d7, knight f1, rook a e8, and rook e2, where white is a tiny bit better because they have pressure on the e-file, and and black's position is not harmonious here with the weak e6 pawn, and this bishop on d7 is quite badly placed. So that's best, but still not pleasant. And in the game after knight g6, queen c2, black definitely realized that there were a lot of problems here and chose to make some drastic measures with f5. And I think that this is just desperation, and because the position is already quite bad, and this is some drastic way of creating counterplay. But after bishop d6, queen d6, the problem is that for black is that the e6 pawn is very weak, and the e5 square is also very weak. And so black wants to, like, for example, put this knight on f6, like, right now. But the problem is that the knight probably now belongs on g6 because it needs to keep controlling the e5 square. And so there's no solution here for black, essentially. And after castles, bishop d7, rook fe1, rook e8, bishop b5 was played. The idea is just to take on c6 to loosen black's control over the e5 square. And so Shankland decides to play knight b8 here. Knight b4 was recommended by the computer, but it still doesn't save black's position after takes, a4, rook c8, queen b3, bishop e8, b5, bishop f7, rook ac1, h6, rook c3, preparing to double up. So black does the same. And after g3, with all the pressure, white has all the pressure here, considering that the knight on f6 cannot leave its square because it needs to control the e5 square. And this bishop on f7 is just horrible. White has the initiative on the queen side here, so white is already better there. But knight b8 was chosen in the game. And after this, bishop f1, knight c6, bishop b5, just repeating once to show the dominance, white's dominance in the position. Knight b8, a4, and here taking on b5 would be a disaster because the a7 pawn would be under too much pressure. So a6, bishop f1, knight c6, b4, knight d8, b5, ab5, knight f7, and then c4 here. And this just totally blasts open the position where black is absolutely not ready to open the position in this way. dc4, knight c4 doesn't look good at all with the knight jumping into the position. And so e5 was played here. And after c5, queen f6, d e5, knight f takes e5, queen a4, knight takes f3, knight takes f3, rook e4, queen a7, putting pressure here on b7. After bishop c8, rook d1, rook e d1, knight f4, rook ac1, rook e7, queen b8, g5, c6, bc6, rook c6, and this is already a very bad position. Let's say after bishop d7, which is played in the game, we see the exchange of queens there, and after knight e4, black has way too many problems with the f5 pawn, for example. And after rook e5, rook d6, rook b7, b6, rook e7, g3, knight g6, and bishop g2, black just threw in the towel here because the d5 pawn is going to be lost. And already from the beginning that we see this was an opening disaster, because of the knight coming to g6 and white having all the pressure on the diagonal, and black having to make some severe concessions with f5. So that was a very easy game, I would say, from the whites, from Jeffrey. And so, yeah, I just recommend that if you face a lot in the system to go just for the simple knight f6 rather than knight g7. And yeah, the next game we're going to look at is from I think the 7th round. From the 7th round between Lazaro Bruzon against Sam Sevian, who played the black side. And here, Bruzon opened up with knight f3, and then d5, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, and then c5, taking the game not into Catalan territory, but we will see after c4, d4, we enter actually a reverse Benoni here, and e3 was played, knight c6, ed4, cd4, the castles here. And the computer already screams to play e5, but the problem here is that after e5, white can completely make a mess out of this position. The idea behind e5 is that, for example, in the normal Benoni, which black plays, like with the c5 pawn, for example, is that typically when the c5 square is not occupied, black can play like knight d7, knight to c5, and that maneuver is very powerful. But in here, white has an extra tempo because they have like the first move, and so they can make a complete mess out of this position. And after d3, knight d7, bishop d2, a5, we can just see this line play out. d2, rook e8, kf e1, bishop c5, and then a3 here, and the e4. So this is the top line recommended by the engine, and they say that black has an advantage here. Okay, d takes e4 is no good because knight to e5, where bishop g4 is a threat, d3 is also a threat, and black's position is already close to winning here. Meanwhile, knight g5 is the best move. After h6, black will actually win a piece here. But after this piece sacrifice, f5, queen h5, fe5, bishop takes fe4, bishop takes e4. This bishop is just immensely strong, as we see all of the pieces aiming at the black king. So best here is rook takes e4. After rook e4, bishop e7, queen d5, king h7, and then knight takes d4. White's position actually looks great here. I mean, white has like a rook and 3 pawns for 2 minor pieces. And even though the computer says that this is slightly better for black, I don't believe it. I think that white's activity is much more pleasant to play with. And so those complications could occur, which is why I think e5 was not played. And rather e6 was played, which is the second most common move. And after d3, bishop d6, black is going to play e5 after the bishop is on d6 to avoid all of those complications. And here knight a3 was played. Bishop g5 is the main move by far, which is quite a thematic idea because white wants to take on f6 and then play knight bd2, so that there can be like a possible tempo to be gained there. And play can continue like h6, bishop f6, queen f6, knight bd2, queen e7, rook e1, castles, knight b3, queen f6, defending this guy. And after knight fd2, bishop c7, a3, prepares b4 at some point, a5, rook c1, and rook d8, There's a complex game to be played here. Um, Many correspondence games have ended in draw in this position, as we see in the database. But instead of bishop g5, knight a3 was chosen, preparing knight c2. And after castles, knight c2, e5. It looks like black gets a massive center here, but there's this nice move b4 here. And this is typically what a Benoni player wants to get. But at the same time, white needs to be careful that the pawn on b4 isn't a weakness. And after rook e8, c5 was chosen in the game. And rook e1 is possible here. And after a6, bishop g5, bishop f5, knight h4, bishop d7, c5, bishop f8, queen f3, h6, bishop f6, queen f6. And we can get this interesting position where white definitely has a lot of play here with, like, for example, bishop e4 and taking control of the f5 square. And this is definitely playable for both sides. It's a complex game. But c5 was chosen in the game. And here, Sevian already made a mistake with bishop c7. It's important to play bishop f8 because this queenside pawn mass needs to be challenged. And for example, bishop f8 could happen, and after bishop g5, and we see this idea employed time and time again, h6, bishop f6, queen f6, and then rook e1, bishop g4, h3, bishop h5, b5, knight d8. Notice that this advance weakens the c5 pawn, so white needs to be really careful. There's this tactic with knight cd4. After bishop c5, knight b3, bishop b6, a4, a5. It's a very complex game, as we see in this position. It's not clear at all, but this is the possible line. The difference between bishop c7 and bishop f8, we can see in this comparison line. With bishop c7, bishop g5 would be really strong. The idea is that if we play h6, then after takes b5, knight e7, knight d2, both knights with knight c4 and knight c4 and knight b4 come, and the bishop on this long diagonal is very strong. This is already a big advantage for white. Meanwhile, if black were to play bishop f8, then after bishop g5 and we employ the same idea, a knight d2 here doesn't make much sense because of this move queen g6, which prepares like f5 if any of the pieces and occupy the e4 square, and also puts pressure on this pawn. So for example, b5 is already a mistake because of knight a5, and the c5 pawn actually just drops. And queen e2 is best, but after bishop g4, so f3 is not desirable because it would close off the diagonal. After bishop f3, takes, b6 here is a nice undermining move. After rook fc1, bc5, bc5, bishop c5, knight e1, e4 here would have been really, was really strong and was played in a game between two Chinese players. After knight e4, bishop e4 is really a nice move with knight e5 coming, and black already has a big advantage here. There's already the possibility of like some tactics with taking on d3 with the piece being loose on e4, and so black already has a big advantage here. And so that's the big difference. Like this b5 advance doesn't really work, and queen e2 would just run to some active play by black. So bishop f8 was definitely a lot better. Bishop c7 here missed actually the opportunity after rook e1. So again, like bishop g5 would have given white quite a big advantage here. But rook e1 and then e4. This is the big idea. This was a very sharp move, and after d4, there's d3, knight a3, bishop g4, and already we see that white is up a pawn, but this bishop diagonal is actually opened. The e5 square is under control. The knight can possibly jump in. There's already pressure on b4, and the spin is quite annoying. So after h3, bishop f3, knight b4, rook b1, a5. Here, both knight b5 and rook e3 are possible. I'm just going to show a line with knight b5 here, knight d7, bishop g5, and after these kind of complications, black already gets a lot of compensation here because the pawn on d3 is very strong and it's supported by the knight on c5. So the computer already recommends to give back the exchange and enter this position with equal material. There's also the move rook e3 here. But this also gives equality after queen d7 because to cover the b5 square, not preventing knight b5. After knight c4, rook a8, rook b3, queen e6, knight d6, takes, bishop a3, d2, rook e2. White will eventually win back the pawn on d2, and the game will be equal. So those two possible lines show how the best way to play these positions. But king g2 was played in the game, which doesn't really do anything. And after knight d7, the pawn at c5 just drops. Let's say bishop e3, there's also this move knight e5. And after rook b3, knight e2, and yeah, okay, so one of the pawns drop. And this is already horrible because the engine rock on bishop h5, but still this possible line could continue where d2 takes, and with obviously black having a big advantage here. Yeah, it's kind of unclear after bishop. No, I guess bishop f7. There's always this rook hanging, so yeah, black would just be clearly better here. And so, king h2 was played in the game, and this is a terrible blunder because of the move a4. And once the rook moves away, for example, rook b7, knight c3 comes, and then queen cannot move away while still defending the knight on f3. And so after a4, white just threw in the towel. So that's a very illustrative game of the complications that could occur from the reverse Benoni. White being up one tempo and in a position that looks like a classical Benoni. Yeah, it's very interesting to see how white could make use of that one tempo to make a complete mess. And so the next game we're going to look at is from round 10 between Darius Swiercz and Lazaro Bruzon. And so here, Swiercz opened up with d4 after knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight c3, bishop e7, bishop f4. So white employs the bishop f4 or queen's gambit declined, one of the most popular ways to deal with it. Bishop g5 also can occur where we can either enter a Lasker variation or a what is it called with this like castles in the b6. I forgot what it's called. Tartakower defense. Yeah, that's what it's called. But here bishop f4 was chosen after castles, e3, knight bd7, c5. This is the main line, and here knight e4 was chosen. c6 is also another possible option. We saw this in game 3 of the 2014 World Championship between Anand and Carlsen, where bishop d3, b6, b4, a5, a3, and then bishop a6, where black managed to trade off the bad bishop here, and seems to be theoretically okay. But in the game, knight e4 was chosen, and here h4. I cannot explain this move. This is just like something of modern chess. It's very interesting. This has been played before by Andreken and Adiban. And f5 was played, which is an improvement over the game move c6. C6 is, I think, already an accuracy because it already allows the changing of the pawn structure in a favorable way. After what we saw in the game, knight e4, d4, knight e5, takes, f6, bishop g3, king h8, bishop c4, b5, bishop b3, a5, and then here bishop c2 would have been really strong, where it targets the e4 pawn, and at some point like f3 can come to undermine the pawn, and there are going to be some weaknesses in black's position. For example, queen d5, castles, rook d8, queen g4, f5, queen h5, where f3 is going to come next, and white already has a big advantage in this position. There are also some key dark square weaknesses on in black's position, so that is a possibility. But here f5 is the best move, and after bishop e2, c6, queen c2, queen e8, knight e5, and here best was just knight e5, bishop e5, knight f6, where black doesn't have any serious problems. For example, this move, and the position is quite solid for black, but rather bishop f6 was chosen, and this allows bishop d6, knight takes d7. bishop takes d7, and then f3, challenging the knight. After knight c3, queen c3. This is already a very bad position for black, notably because of the weakness on d6, the possibility of playing b4 or a4 with a queenside initiative, and rook f7. This just anticipates bishop d6. So bishop d6, queen d8, h5, b6, f4, bishop e8, and then g4 is a very typical way of opening up the structure where black has already played f5. And after rook d7, g5, bishop e7, and then bishop takes e7, rook takes e7, and here bishop a6 was chosen. I tried sometime to figure out the difference between playing bishop a6 and then h6. With the idea of h6 later, and playing the move h6 now. The point is that h6 now is actually better because this fixes the structure after g6. And there is a risk of locking up the position too much. And if we get a position like, for example, if all of the pawns were already locked up, like this position, and black doesn't do anything and white cannot break through, then it's going to be a draw. However, now with this move order, white can play bishop a6, rook b8, b3, and this is important not to allow like, for example, b4 and then bc5 here with bishop d8 to bishop d7 to c8, and possibly the rooks doubling up. This can create some problems for white. So b3 here is a nice move, and after b5, b4, white is eventually going to break through with a4 here. As we will see in the game, the technique was quite good from Darius Swiercz here. The problem is that after bishop a6 and rook b8, b4 was chosen. And actually, h6 here would have been really strong. Because if we play gh6, then after this line, black can make use of the g file here. And queen g7 with some counterplay. And if we were to play g6 here, then after this exchange, bishop d7, again, we see this problem with the opening of the b file and black getting some counterplay. So that was a missed opportunity here. Instead, rook c7 was played, which allowed this move h6, and now white fixes up the structure nicely on this side of the board and can focus on the queen side. After b5, a4. Yeah, and in this position, I want to ask you to maybe pause the video and try to find the best way to find one of the only ways to win this position. Try to figure out like the correct setup of pieces and what white's plan should be next. Okay, so here, if you've already paused the video and try to figure out what to do here, essentially the best plan here for white is to triple up on the c file with the rooks and the queen, and then at some point take on b5 and then play c6, where the pawn on c6 will actually be really strong, and then possibly bishop b7 with like, for example, all of these pieces are on the c file, and then we take on b5 and then c6, and then the bishop can land on b7, and notice that the a5 pawn, the a7 pawn, as well as the b5 pawn becomes very weak. And so that's the best way to win. And we see this idea employed by Swiercz very nicely. After a couple of more moves, bishop e8 is a big mistake here, because actually ab5 would have just won a pawn with rook a5 here. And for queen d7, there's actually a nice move, rook b5 takes, and then c6, where white is just completely winning. This is no good. And so yeah, bishop e8 was a big mistake, but anyways, white decides to employ the idea here with an Alekhine's gun. This is something we rarely see, but it's a very thematic idea. After queen e7, queen a3, queen d8 takes, and c6 here. So this is a very nice technique. The rook b6, bishop b7, queen b8, queen a5. This applies pressure on both b5 as well as a7. And so after king e7, rook c5, king f8. Okay, if king d6, then rook a2 still. White is going to win a pawn. And the queen is perfectly placed on a5 to put pressure. Meanwhile, after king f8, rook b5 takes. In this position, Bruzon just resigned because after I think bishop b5, there's rook c8, and yeah, this is just game over. So that was a very nice game by Bruzon there, making use of the change in pawn structure in a favorable way, and then just breaking through on the queen side there. And yeah, we're gonna move on to the next game, which is played in round 11 between Xiong, or rather John Burke, playing the white side, against Xiong playing the black side. And here, e4 is played, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, so we see an Italian game. Bishop c5, castles, knight f6, d3, d6, c3, h6, and here rook e1. This is quite common knowledge to Italian players, but we know that something like after white castles, and then if you play something like h3 here, where black hasn't castled, there's always this possibility of playing like a move like g5, maybe with some preparation, or like right now, there are some practical dangers in this position. Maybe not now, but at some point, black can employ this g5 idea. And so don't play h3, rook e1, very standard, castles, and now h3, so now it's safer. And after a5, d4, bishop a7, and this move just maintains the tension in the center, because black for sure does not want to take on d4 here and give white the center for free, with knight c3 coming. Very nice square for the knight also, just given for free essentially. And so bishop a7 is a common response. After bishop b3, rook e8, bishop c2, white is completely ready in this line to give up the bishop, because ed4 is possible. After this move, knight b4, knight c3, takes. This reaches a one of the major lines in the Italian, where white has a nice knight on c3 here. Meanwhile, they gave up the bishop pair, so this is possible. But in the game, bishop b7 was chosen. After a4, just gaining space. Notice that it does weaken the b4 square, but then again, as I shown in the previous line, white has no problems with giving up the bishop, because the knight will land on c3. So queen c8 was chosen here, which is an interesting move, threatening bishop h3. And it notably works here, because if you play a move, let's just say a waiting move, or like a useless move here, like rook a3, then after bishop h3, gh3, queen h3, white probably needs to play knight h2 here to cover the g4 square, and the pawn and the central pawn just drops. So that's the reason that bishop takes h3 is actually a major threat. So after bishop e3, this supports the center, and for ed4, bishop takes d4, because we need to still defend this pawn. There's some pressure on it. Knight takes d4, cd4, and then c5. And here, this is already an inaccuracy. Playing something more solid would have been preferable. But c5 here allows the move e5, where the best move is actually knight h5, but after knight a3, preparing knight c4 to d6, cd4, queen d3, g6, bishop b3, threatening queen g6. And here, best is like knight f4 after this line. White still maintains the advantage here for sure, with more active pieces. But knight d5 was chosen in the game, which allowed queen d3, threatening some queen h7 check. After g6, bishop b3 was chosen, which is also a good move, but the computer also recommends queen d2, just putting pressure on h6. And after king h7, there is knight e3 with knight c4 to d6 coming. And also similarly, cd4, knight a3, and maybe making use of this open c file. And this is already already gives white quite a big advantage. But bishop b3 was chosen, which is also good. And here knight f4, which is a big mistake because it allows queen e4. But even other moves like this, like it doesn't look too pleasant with this, for example. The weakness on f6, the knight possibly coming to c4, still gives white a big advantage. Meanwhile, knight f4 was chosen, which allows this move with tempo. Knight e6, queen h4, c4, and then here knight c3. Knight c3, knight bd2 was actually better. The idea of knight c3 and knight bd2 are similar in that they want to go to either d5 or e4 to try to checkmate the black king with like queen h6 and knight f6. But the difference is that after knight c3, there's actually this move knight g5, which is really nice. The point being that queen h6 can occur here, where bishop takes d4, knight d5, and then rook e6, where black will manage to sacrifice the exchange and get a lot of compensation here. And this is dynamically equal. Meanwhile, another move like bishop a2 runs into this, and then and this line, where black manages to trade off the queens and is down a pawn for the moment, but this blockade of this pawn and these double pawns are not looking too good. White can't actually make any progress in this position, and this is already equal. So knight g5 was a big move that was missed by Jeffrey, and de5 was played, which allowed queen h6, bishop c6, and for d5, c takes b3, knight e4, threatening mate, queen d8, and then de6, and here black just resigned on account of here knight g5, and black just loses. So this was a really nice game by John Burke, making use of the diagonals here and just going for the attack. And yeah, we're gonna move on to the next game here, played in the tie breaks between Sam Sevian and Fabiano Caruana. So Sam opened up with e4, e5, knight c3. So we enter the Vienna game. After knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, d3, knight e5 was chosen. This is the main move, and after knight g2, bishop c5. The main move is knight takes c4, which is perfectly reasonable, but typically the idea in the Vienna is to play this move queen d3, because once the knight took on c4, this d3 square is actually available for the queen. The queen can possibly swing over what is maybe going to play castles or f4, and there is some there's some initiative here, although it should be completely fine as played, I think, between Carlsen and Grishuk, or Nakamura and Carlsen as well. With Carlsen playing the black side. So after here, bishop c5 is chosen, h3, d6, knight g3, and this knight is actually quite reasonable on the square because it controls f5. And after knight takes c4, dc4, bishop e6, targeting the c4 pawn, queen d3, castles, b3, a5, castles, h6. I think that objectively black has no problems here. After bishop e3, knight e7, typical idea to reroute the knight to c5, and obviously black does not even want to open up the f file and provide some control, some pressure along this file. So knight d7, knight b5, takes, then c5, rook a d1, b6, and here a4 was chosen. Better here is just f4, playing the style of the Vienna game. This is just recommended after ef4, rook f4. Okay, white has some initiative here with possibly knight d4 coming, rook df1, and that would have been better, but here a4 was chosen. And then king h7, and with this move, black has no problems on the being attacked here at all. And again, f4 was possible, but rook d2 was chosen, just trying to play this slowly. After bishop d7, threatening to take on b5 here, because the knight has some potential if it reaches d5, and so white decides to play knight c3. And after queen g5, f4 again is possible, but it wouldn't give anything concrete after takes, and we exchange the queens, and we get this position where black is very solid and white has no real way to make progress. There are no pawn breaks, and the pieces can look good, but there's no way to break down black's position. And here queen g5 was actually chosen in the game, which I really don't understand, because after hg5, for the meantime this pawn is doubled, but it controls more squares on the g file rather than the h file, which is typically why we say that the pawn on g5 on the g file is better than the pawn on h file, because on the h file it only controls one square. And here this just improves black's position, and I think black already has some initiative after knight e5, rook a c8, f3, bishop e6, knight f5, bishop d5, and then rook d5 here. Okay, cd5 is possibly better, but still after this sequence, black still has some initiative, It's similar to the game, but white does not have a double pawn anymore. And rook d5 was chosen in the game, which doesn't undouble the pawn, but has the idea of possibly bringing the knight to d5. And after g6, here in f5, I think black is already better here. e5, gf5, rook d2, king g6, g4, f4, and knight d5. Because knight f5, hopefully everyone sees that we can just sacrifice the exchange and it's completely winning. With rook h8, knight e6, knight d4 coming, white is completely busted here. So knight d5 is chosen in the game, and after rook f7, rook e1, rook e8, knight c3, rook h8, king g2, knight d7, knight b5, knight f6, knight c3, rook f to h7. So black is just improving the position slightly and slowly. After rook h1, king f7, rook e2, king e6, knight b5 is chosen in the game. And this is, okay, obviously both players are in a bit of time trouble because this is the Tiebreaks game, which is, I think, in rapid format. Knight b5 just leaves control over the e4 square. So here e4 would have been really strong, where knight c3, e3 is just crushing, and fe4, knight g4 is also just crushing. So that was a missed opportunity here. But king d7 was played, and after knight c3, king c6, rook d2, king c5. I'm not sure that this is the best configuration. Best is probably just playing king e6, trying to play for c6, d5, and that would give black a big advantage. But knight c3, king c6, rook d2, king c5, rook dd1, rook e7, rook he1, and then rook he8 was played. I think this is fine, but it does allow this knight e4 check. Although, even though this move would keep the game going on for longer, but I think black would still slowly build up the position. After knight e4, rook e4, rook h7, c3, king c6, and the king again is going to go for this king d7 to e6 and the c6 and d5 plan. And as long as black doesn't blunder any tactics with like rook e5, king e5, and then like rook e1 where the rook on e8 just hangs, I think black would just be comfortably better here. So yeah. So that's, I think, the best plan that black should go for. But instead rook d2 was chosen, and c6 here. Here h4 would actually, I think, save the draw for white. Rook e1 just accepts a slow death after e4. Actually, it's quite a quick death because the position opens up. But h4 here would have then given black white some chances. After gh4, king h3, rook g8, rook d3. White is not going to take the pawn because that would just lead to mate. But the position is still very solid here with the king on h3 using the pawn on h4 as a shield. And black cannot play knight h7 to g5 because knight e4 would attack some loose squares, loose pawns in black's position. So this would actually be a draw, but rook ed1 was played, and after e4, rook d6, ef3, king f2 was chosen. After rook e2, a nice exchange sacrifice here, which it's not even just an exchange sacrifice because white just loses material even more here. After rook c6, because once this guy moves, then this guy will also, the rook on d6 will also hang. After this exchange, this is obviously just completely winning, and white resigned in this position. So that's an instructive way of dealing with the Vienna. I think I think the way that black played in this position or in this game was the best way to play objectively. With the setup that I mean of like knight a5 and taking the bishop on c4, yeah, that's pretty good. And the last game here is also in the tie breaks between Wesley So and Sam Sevian. Wesley opened up with d4, and after g6, so going for a modern defense, c4, bishop g7, knight f3, d6, knight c3, and here this is already an invitation to the King's Indian defense. So if, let's say after g6, white played e4, then most likely we will go into a modern defense with d6 and then like bishop e3, and a6 is the is like how Hikaru plays this position, very popular stuff. or this can obviously also enter the pairs after this and then knight f6, right? So those are some other options that black could employ. But here, after c4, bishop g7, knight f3, d6, knight c3, knight d7, this implies that, or shows that black intends to play a quick e5 here. It's not very good objectively, but it's something that maybe white players, something definitely that white players are not very used to because they don't usually prepare for offbeat stuff like this. And after e4, e5, bishop e2, so white just plays it calmly. And after knight ge7, castles, rook e1, very standard moves here. H6 and the bishop f1 here. Instead of bishop f1, there's also a possibility to play d takes e5 here. Noting that knight takes e5 would be kind of a mistake here because bishop e3 comes and c5 is going to be a very easy break to execute. For example, knight f3, bishop f3, g5, queen c2, knight g6, and c5 here, with quite a big advantage here. There's some pressure on the d file and the d6 pawn. And instead of knight takes e5, maybe de5 is possible. And after bishop e3, f5, this reaches double-edged play after ef5, gf5, queen c2. And understandably, white probably just wants to play the position more solid, don't take any chances, and just build up the position slowly there, which is why I think bishop f1 was played, adding control over the center. And then f5 here. I think c5 is also possible. After d takes c5, d takes c5, both black and white has holds in the center here. Black can possibly play knight c6 and d4, while white can play knight d5 and put a piece there. So this provides some equal chances. But f5 was chosen, which is more thematic. And after d takes e5, d takes e5 was chosen. It's also possible to go knight takes e5, knight e5, d e5, and then bishop e3 here. Knight c6, and then like this line could occur, queen b3. And okay, white is objectively better here, but still it's like very unclear. Black's bishops are quite active, and with ideas of like e4 coming, this is not as clear, although maybe this is just like good, objectively speaking here. But anyways, d takes e5 was chosen, more solid option. And here b4. So this is very standard queenside expansion that white typically employs in the King's Indian defense. And Wesley So is a big expert on the white side of the King's Indian, I think. Knight c6, b5, knight d4, bishop a3, and then rook f7 here was chosen. Rook e8 still doesn't change the situation. This is already pretty bad. After ef5, gf5, knight d4, ed4, rook e8 takes, and knight d5. This is a terrible situation with with the c7 pawn hanging, and like queen d8 would also just run into bishop e7. I think that this is just winning. Queen e8. I'm not sure if taking on c7 is possible, but I think it is. Okay, no, something simple like bishop e4 seems to be very good. But yeah, this is already looking very good for black, obviously. And so rook f7 was chosen, and here c5. This is a mistake. It's not obvious why first off at first glance. The computer already recommends ef5, and excuse me. After knight f3, queen f3, gf5, rook ad1, e4, queen h3. Okay, we can see this line where play gets quite irrational here, to be honest. So understandably, e takes f5 was not played, but c5 was played. The idea is just to open the c4 square for the bishop. However, there is this very strong move, knight f8, which covers the e6 square, preparing bishop c4, bishop e6, and it's not quite clear here how white can get a big advantage here. For example, bishop e2, bishop e6, and the position is still a big mess. So knight f8 was a really important regrouping, which is not found in the game. Rather, f takes e4 was played, and maybe Sam Sevian thought that you definitely need to take either on d4 or take on e4 because the knight is being attacked. But here, Wesley found a very nice move after knight d4, e4, and then not taking the pawn, but playing bishop c4. Because taking on c3 would lead to bishop f7, king f7, and queen d5, where the king is very exposed here, and it's definitely not good with the engine already saying +10. And after bishop c4, knight e5 was chosen. But after the trade here and taking the pawn, this just requires technique. And we can see how the game proceeded with bishop e2 targeting this pawn, a4, knight d2, takes, and then knight f3, and the d4 pawn is going to fall for sure. d3 takes, queen a1, king g8, knight d4, bishop c4, queen c3, b5 takes, knight d6, and this is already pretty bad with the pawn being pushed forward one more time. And after bishop d5, which just allows the pawn to queen, mate is going to come in 2 moves. So yeah, this was a very nice game by Wesley. The opening choice was rather unusual by Sam, but yeah, so maybe just going for a better opening is a better way to try to fight for the win there. But either way, that's going to be the end of this video. So I'm happy that I finally finished the coverage of the 2021 US Championships. Maybe I'm going to do it again for the 2022 US Championships. And yeah, thank you everyone so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video. I will be posting more videos, mainly on openings, but also on some of these tournaments if there are some really interesting games. Please do comment what you want to see next, and that's going to be it from me. Thank you everyone for watching. Please stay safe and have fun playing chess. Bye bye.